I think most people know that the guide dogs should be left alone, but they forget, especially when the dog is as charismatic as Percy.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Kol Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. I recently read an article in Scientific American exploring how and why our Paleolithic ancestors domesticated wolves. The theory is that during the last ice age, hunter-gatherers shared surplus meat with wolves. The human's omnivorous digestive system restricted protein intake, which, if consumed at very high levels, can lead to potentially deadly protein poisoning. The leftover meat was thrown to the wolves, bringing humans and wolves into close contact, making the grateful wolves more docile, and eventually forging an interspecies partnership and turning wolves into dogs. After domestication, dogs proved invaluable as guards, supply carriers, sled pullers, sheepdogs, hunters, sniffers of bombs, providers of furry warmth, and so on. The earliest known example of a dog guiding a blind person comes from a 1st century CE mural in the ruins of the Roman city of Herculaneum. Our guest today has had 7 guide dogs and recently completed training with an 8th, the subject of his new book.
We're delighted to chat with Ari Ashkenazi, who was a professor of art at California State University, Los Angeles from 1972 to 1991. He took a disability leave due to the onset of blindness, earned a certificate in rehabilitation teaching for the blind, received ordination as a Zen Buddhist monk, and worked with AIDS patients who experienced blindness as a result of their illness. He is the author of a memoir, The Skeptic, Jews, Zen, and Blindness, and a new book, About My Dog, Guide Dog Training at the Seeing Eye. Ari, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You earned a PhD in anthropology of art and visual arts education and were a professor of art for 2 decades. I imagine that having late onset progressive blindness is especially difficult for someone involved in the visual arts. How has your relationship with art changed in the past 30 plus years?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It certainly has been a journey. The thing I discovered was that you can take the eyesight away from an artist, but you can't take the art away, and you can't take away the visual orientation. So I'm still very visual. I see things nobody around me sees with 20/20 vision. I've got a tunnel in my left eye, and it's very small. I have no vision in my right eye. So I don't have much to work with, but I certainly make use of it.
Do you see, like you said, aspects of art that maybe when we're looking at the full picture, maybe we just sort of overlook because of your sort of tunnel that you're looking through?
I have to judge my distance from looking at something, let's say in a museum. I have to back up far enough so that I can see more of it, but I don't usually see the entire piece. But what's interesting is that my art history education, I remember works, and then I can scan around it and enjoy the whole thing without seeing the entire piece. Frequently, I don't.
You're currently a resident of the NoHo Senior Arts Colony in North Hollywood, California. How has living in that community supported your ongoing interest and involvements in the arts?
We have a lot of programs here. It's run by Engage. The programs are run by Engage, which I understand exists in other places besides NoHo SAC. But we have classes in all sorts of art forms. The residents here all have backgrounds in some art form. A lot of people in the industry, actors, writers, screenwriters, designers for the film industry. There are people that had careers in the dance, There are people who had careers in painting, sculpture, architecture, engineering, uh, and writing. I leave writing to the end because one of the things I started doing almost immediately after the sight loss began in 1991, I had written previously, but I realized that it would be a great avenue for me to use writing rather than the visual arts to communicate with other people. So I started writing a great deal. I moved to San Francisco and I had started volunteering in hospices. I was living there and I was meeting these incredible guys that were in the process of dying. And I was thinking, these stories are going to be lost. Somebody's got to sit down and write them. And so I decided I was going to be that person. So I wrote about them, and I wrote about individuals. I wrote about groups that we had, and a lot of that is contained in the Skeptic. But that's the art form that I have adopted to replace the visual side. But for example, this week we had our seminar on Monday night, and I had written a story about my grade school in Milwaukee, where I went to school as a kid. And it was the response I got from all of the people there was, "It's so visual. Nobody writes such visual stuff in this group." So, yeah, you can't take it away. It's just there.
I appreciate what you're saying in terms of writing in a very visual style. I think that's something that becomes very apparent when one is reading your memoirs, and it is an art form. I think if you're maybe visually inclined, you write in a very visual way. I'm musically inclined, so I think of my writing as sonorous. It has a sort of musical or sound quality to it. And there is a direct, I think, benefit to being an artistic person who writes. It just comes across a little bit differently.
I agree.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. In one of the essays in your book, The Skeptic, you write that adopting Zen Buddhism does not require giving up your beliefs or identity, such that being a Buddhist and a Jew are not incompatible. Did your Jewish identity contribute to you becoming a Zen Buddhist monk?
When you go to the synagogue and you're looking forward to the oneg more than the service, there's a problem. So, I just got terribly bored with it. I started looking around for other venues, as it were, other ways of being. It wasn't that I was abandoning being a Jew. I don't think you can do that. But it was a frustration that led me to look around. And when I found Zen, I was not aware of how it was going to affect me. Zen doesn't have a belief system. I don't think it's a philosophy, because I don't know much about formal philosophical definitions. But what you learn practicing Zen, what you learn is to become an observer. And eventually, what you observe is basically everything about your experience, including Judaism, in my case. And when you're observing yourself, you develop a distance from your beliefs, from your life experience, from basically everything. And you realize that what you are is a consciousness machine, kind of a machine. I don't know, machine may be the wrong word, but what we are is consciousness animals or consciousness beings. So you can look at all of that, and it's a little bit at a distance, and you have a great deal more freedom. And that's what Zen is really about. It's not about becoming a Buddhist in the usual sense of the term, of a religion.
That idea of being distant from beliefs and so forth, was that also something that maybe attracted you to anthropology as a study of sort of being a little bit removed from what others are doing and observing them somewhat dispassionately?
It's interesting you bring that up. I don't think I ever thought of that. Being a Jew in this society already made me an observer. I was already that. I was already in that mode.
And as you're saying that, I'm now thinking, well, it's probably no surprise that, Franz Boas is so associated with the development of anthropology, Jewish guy. Sociology developed so much by Emil Durkheim, another Jew. And then you have psychology with Freud, another Jew. All these people sort of taking a step back and observing because they're not in the in crowd, so to speak. You also write that exile from our various homes, both literal and figurative, is essential for the progression of spiritual growth. Essentially, you need to be uncomfortable and experience loss in order to grow, and specifically, you need to surrender to that reality, which you argue is another name for leaving home. Could you elaborate on this?
Well, it's interesting because the Japanese call an ordination of a Zen monk Tokudo, Tokudo. And that word in Japanese means leaving home. The Zen masters were very, very aware of this requirement to distance yourself from what you are comfortable with. I mean, when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, isn't that a neat idea? Well, it is a neat idea. And then after I'd been sitting on my tokas for a year or two, I suddenly realized what it was like as an experience as opposed to an idea. Everything that you're experiencing, you're not it. You're watching it. And that includes things that happen to yourself, which is a big surprise. It's a huge surprise. And it does allow for this expansion of awareness, which I think is the payoff of the spiritual journey.
Has that mindset helped you through all of the different changes within your body over the years?
Oh, definitely. As recently as today, I'm having hearing loss at this stage, and I got the hearing aid, and it's helping a lot. But it's if I were thinking that the experiences in my life, especially the medical ones, if I identified with them as my life, I could get really depressed. I was 49 when that sight loss began, and it's progressive. I completely lost my right eye in January of 22. If I took this all as part of my body and my experience, and I wasn't standing away from it a little bit, I could get really down about it. But for some reason, I have always been able to thrive anyway. Over time, I just think, well, what can I do with this? What is the gift of this? Because there's always a gift. And there's another piece of it, which is you have what you want. Now, I know that sounds crazy for me to say that I wanted to be hearing impaired or I wanted to be blind, but I don't think I mean want in quite the same way. It's just that things are not the enemy. When things happen to you, they're not the enemy. I'm not fighting blindness. I'm not fighting hearing loss. I'm experiencing them, and then I'm going, well, I can do this and I can do that, and I can survive. And I do. I have a plan to be 100, and I don't know what shape I'm going to be in at that point, but we will find out.
Your new book, About My Dog, gives a day-by-day account of your experience training with your seeing eye dog, Percy, in Morristown, New Jersey. The book began as emails you sent to friends. Why did you decide to make those daily updates available to the public?
Well, there were a couple of reasons. One was my friends started asking me questions about this training, and I suddenly realized most sighted people have no knowledge of how this works and why it works. I had these emails about the experience, the daily experience, the nitty-gritty day, that we did this and we did that, and so pissed me off, and so is, just has never learned how to function as a blind person. Why in hell do they keep dropping everything on the floor? Why do they spill things, etc.? Because there are ways of avoiding all that. Anyway, that was what I hadn't written about, was exactly how a dog is trained and what goes into it. The title is about my dog, but like any memoir, it's really about me. It's always about the writer. And that wonderful furry guy, Percy, is just kind of there. And he brings things out about everything.
Well, speaking of which, you described the different people who you were training with in New Jersey, and some of them came from very different backgrounds than your own. And you reveal how your preconceived notions were sometimes confirmed, but also sometimes proven wrong, and that even a liberal humanistic Jew like yourself can find friendship with unlikely people, like evangelical Christians, for instance. In The Skeptic, you also write about how meditation taught you how to find silence, which I imagine can calm you down and open you up to listening. Do you have any practical tips about opening yourself up to others in the way that you describe?
I mean, I was the only person from the West Coast there, but except that I didn't think of it as the West Coast. I thought of it as the left coast. And the world I live in is very left-wing, very open to Eastern thought, meditation, silence. We're all a bunch of peaceniks, most of us. I was flying to New Jersey. I was born in Newark, so it wasn't like I've never been to the East Coast. I just kind of forgot how it was back there. And I also forgot, or I didn't know, how much the Christian nationalist thing is influencing people. Blind people, this is not a politically correct thing to say, but blind people are a damaged population. We become very self-absorbed trying to deal with this. A lot of the folks that I met there, the evangelicals in particular, grouped themselves together. They're kind of a support group for each other. And so they get absolutely beatific praying out loud, and they have no idea what it's like to witness this if it's totally new or strange to you. Almost immediately when I got there, I decided to shut my mouth and just observe and not comment and not say anything. And there was one person there who, it turned out, we did not agree on absolutely anything. And what I mean by that, we didn't talk about religion and we didn't talk about politics. This was not stuff about Trump or Judaism versus Christianity or anything like that. It was just things like, I really like Japanese food. She couldn't stand it, would never eat it. I said, have you ever tried Chinese? No, I can't stand Chinese food either. And it wasn't that she was nasty or anything about it. We couldn't find anything we agreed about. She didn't like the Beatles. She didn't like the Rolling Stones. She didn't like audible books. And she was basically totally blind. She didn't believe in adaptive skills for the blind. I mean, you name something, we did not agree on it. And it was absolutely hilarious. Because when you're in a guide school, you're broken into little groups of 4 people, and you ride a van to the place where you're going to learn how to go up and down an escalator with the dog, go in and out of an elevator, all of those technical things that we learn how to do. But we're in this van driving through Morristown, New Jersey, or we're going to New York because we trained in Manhattan, street crossings and street lights and reading traffic and all that sort of thing. Well, we became absolutely hilariously laughing in the van because things would come up. Do you like such and such a show on TV? Oh, I hated that. You didn't like Seinfeld? No, I hated Seinfeld. Anything. Movies. Oh, I hated that one. I loved it. Something was said about, oh, I would never go to LA. It's a sinful, horrible place. Dirty, filthy. I don't want to go. I will never go there. And the only thing I ever said was, well, I think I would be very lost in a small town in Wyoming. Well, this went on for a while, and then I found out that this is Miss X, she and I were very close in age. I think I was the oldest person. She was the second oldest, and from this little town in Wyoming. Well, we started laughing about how we couldn't agree about anything, and that was how it started. And then I found out that after she'd said she would never go to Manhattan, she didn't need to cross Broadway, she didn't need to see Times Square, she didn't have to go to the World Trade Center Memorial, none of that. She wasn't going to go. Well, about a week after she said all that in the van, guess who went to New York? And she trained like the rest of us on those streets. Well, it's a long story about New York. It's difficult for a dog and a blind person, but that's why we go there, because LA is pretty much the same. So anyway, I never divulged that I was a PhD. I was just another blind person, and we were working with our dogs. And lo and behold, over that time we were there, we got to be good friends, and we've actually talked on the phone probably every 2 weeks since. And she's not an evangelical, she's a Methodist. But she did slip into a criticism of the border problems in our last phone call. And I just said something like, I don't want to talk about that, or let's not talk about that, or something. There was one other thing that she did, revealing, that she really did vote for Trump and would again. And I just didn't react. I just decided to shut my mouth and listen. And when we did talk, we talked about things that we had in common, mostly the dogs and the experience of blindness and things like that. And we're still friends, and I have a feeling that we'll remain that way.
There are a lot of misconceptions about the blind population and guide dogs. What are some perceptions you'd like to correct?
Oh, the big one is that the dog is actually guiding me. So, for example, I will get out of a car. I'm a passenger in the car, and I have the dog, and we're going to walk into a Japanese restaurant because I don't like to go to them. And the person or persons I'm with will say something like, oh, there's one of those parking things that people trip over, or, oh, there's a pole and there's a tree over here. And I keep telling, look, I spent 3 weeks training with a dog that was trained for over 2 years to deal with obstructions in the environment. I know what he'll be telling me, and we've worked together and we know each other really well. He'll get me in there without a problem. Even if the door is open onto the sidewalk and we have to get around that, he will tell me how to do that. And he always does. And we get in there without a scratch. And, we have sushi and love it. And it's all very fine. And he gets under the table and nobody even knows there's a dog in the room. People don't really realize how incredibly intelligent and well-trained these dogs are. So they try to be, they're kind of patronizing. I mean, the people around me are really nice people. They mean really well. And so I don't stop that, damn it. I don't want to do that. But I do want them to know, look, that's why I got the dog. I got the dog because I was walking into pillars in the lounge downstairs because they're the same color as the rug, and I couldn't see them. The dog gets me in and out of everything without a problem. There are two things that most human beings fear. Death is one, and blindness is the other. So I don't know whether people are consciously aware of that, but I mean, it's been studied. Being around a blind person with a dog, it's entertaining and it's great to meet these dogs and everything, but there's this thing in the back of your mind that goes, oh my God, what would I do if that happened to me? And that fear is there. So that's something that I think people should be made aware of that. Because in every other way, we're exactly the same as everybody else.
Anything specific, just for the record, about the dogs, maybe how people should approach? I know that you send me like protocols in terms of how to deal with the dogs. That was very helpful. Maybe just some pointers if you see a guide dog out there, how to interact with it, that kind of thing.
I think most people know that the guide dogs should be left alone, but they forget, especially when the dog is as charismatic as Percy. People want to pet him. People want to meet him. So people need to understand that when they're in the harness, they are working and they need to be ignored, including not talking to them, not calling them by name, not just ignore. The thing to do is ignore them entirely. And then if you're lucky, and my friends, I think I can put in this category, when we're in a private space, not a public one. In a public one, he stays in the harness and he has to be controlled. But in a private situation, like in my apartment or some other situation like that, if I take the harness off, he becomes the most social dog you can possibly imagine. He goes around the room, gets his bone, he tries to give it to people as a gift. That's the most complimentary thing that a dog can do, is to give his bone to you. And yeah, he wants you to throw it to him, but he'll bring it back to you. Retrievers are retrievers. So yeah, I mean, they do have a life as a dog, but the reason why I've had 8 dogs, I'm only 80, I'll be 82 in a couple months. I'm only 82 and I've had 8, and I haven't been blind since birth. I've been blind since I was 49. So how come that adds up? My God, that really adds up. You don't keep them very long. No, you don't. You keep them, the really good ones, the ones that really work out well, I've kept a while. What I mean by that is that I keep them between 5 and 8 years usually. And why do I do that? Because they deserve to have that social in a family dog experience too, because they get bred at the seeing eye. They get taken away from their mothers at 8 weeks or so when they're weaned. They go to a puppy raiser family where they're socialized, taken everywhere in a little hood that says guide dog in training. And then they come back to the seeing eye when they're about a year old. And for that year, they are trained every single day for that year, 365 days, twice a day, morning and night. And then at the end of that, when they're 2 years old or very close to it, they get taken away from the trainer, and they end up with this weird stranger that they've never met before. And I remember when Percy first came into my room, all he could do was look at the door where the trainer left. And there he was with me, and he didn't know who the hell I was, but he had to get used to me. And now he sleeps with his head on my lap when we're watching MSNBC or something like that. Left coast. So, he's a regular dog with me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Ari.
Glad to do it.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.